Hi friends, it's Olivia and today I'm talking about everything that I read for Giallo July. Giallo July was a readathon and watchathon hosted by Alex at the Bookiebus as well as Bird of Storytime and Kelsey of Simon Slashers. I mostly participated in just the reading prompts. I did watch one new Giallo film this month, which was Dark Sister, which is a recent Australian Giallo film that's I guess not a true Giallo, but it takes a lot of inspiration in how it looks and has those major nods to tropes in Giallo films, such as like the gloved hands and the lighting that's very Argento, as well as gloved hands and the over-the-top sensuality of the filmmaking. However, the movie really wasn't something that I would recommend anyone see. I think it's underseen in terms of like how well it really got off to a great start, but as like the film progressed, I felt like it kind of went off the rails, and not off the rails like deranged good, but just kind of lost track of what it wanted to do. So I would say check it out if you're someone like me who wants to see a lot of Australian genre film and is interested in Australian independent film, but not something that I think is like a must-see for every Giallo or horror fan. But so back to the books that I read this month. The first prompt for Giallo July was to read something with yellow on the cover, and for that I picked The Hunted by Gabriel Bergmoser. And this book follows a service station owner, a roadhouse in the middle of the Australian outback. His niece has just come to stay with him because there's stuff going on at home, and they don't really have a relationship, the grandfather and the granddaughter. So they're both feeling nervous about this reunion and having to live with each other for the first time. And that's complicated then because a woman shows up to this servo in the middle of the night, badly injured. There's kind of like some other characters that are around too, and you don't know what anyone's intentions are. However, we do know that this woman is being hunted by this gang that then comes. This book it was really good. It was such a ride. And it's not just that one story of a standoff at this like service station, but there's like more really deranged and wild stuff that's happened in the meantime. If you like a book like this, then I would recommend movies like 100 Bloody Acres out of Australia, or I mean even like Wake and Fright, something that's classic. This is kind of like the classic Australian story of the outback being overly wild and not knowing what people's intentions are, and kind of the tension between people who live in cities and who live in more rural regional areas. But yeah, definitely something if you're looking for like an action thriller, but also had really well depicted gore in it, and you root for the characters you're wanting to root for. The villains are, pretty interesting. One of the other prompts was to read something with a animal on the cover, and I picked Taaqtumi because it has this beautiful raven on the cover. Taaqtumi, anthology of Arctic horror stories. And this was such a mixed collection for me, that some of them are really standouts, that there's like really interesting stories of wilderness survival horror with bears and people. There's zombie stories in here. Unfortunately, like the longest story that's like in the middle of this collection was just such a dud for me comparatively, that it really brought down the pace of reading. So, I think if you start that story and you don't really pick up on it either, I don't feel like it gains steam as it goes. So just skip it. If you're reading a long story and it's not doing anything for you, I'd recommend skipping it. But I haven't seen anyone talk about this, but then whenever I went to Goodreads, I'd see that, yeah, some of my friends have read this already. But I wasn't you know, familiar with like it on a story by story level, but a lot of the shorter stories are really interesting, and it does also bring in those elements of colonization and the horrors of the residential boarding schools that white Canadians, you know, were taking children from their families. And so you see those like trickle down effects of those real life horrors that are told in these stories. As well as like, I do think it was the right time of year to read this, even though it made me even colder. It's like every single story is like ice and snow. And it is very chilly here in Australia still. I think that if you're looking for a horror story collection and you're interested in the theme of this and you do want something that's more cold weather, I don't think it's going to disappoint. There were like some 5-star stories in here, and it was just that really that one long story that I just did not get anything from, that it took me a lot longer to read than it really should have. So mixed in that regard, as you know, most short story anthologies are. One of the other prompts to read a book with a color in the title, and so I picked Rouge by Mona Awad, which definitely does have to do with red. It's a it's a big point of the story. Rouge is a dark fairy tale that has to do with the skincare industry and beauty expectations and the cult-like effects of skincare beauty influencers. Yeah, it's sold as a dark fairy tale, and I really felt like it delivered on that in ways that I don't feel like everything that kind of uses that as a buzzword does, because it used so many elements both from stories like Snow White as well as the Red Shoes. That is a huge factor in the story, the idea of being so consumed by something and it kind of leading to your unraveling, but also being an anchor for you. This had what I wanted from it in terms of the horror, that I felt like it delivered on the level of horror that I was expecting, more so like an Eyes Wide Shut kind of, you know, demented people, you know, just like cult-like horror rather than, you know, something that's more graphic. As well as like the way that the writing style itself conveys that was so interesting to me, that you actually see the unraveling of her mind and how things start to get mixed up for her, that it's almost like an aphasia where she's replacing more and more words as the book goes on. That was really interesting. And this like story at the center of it is like the story about a mother and a daughter, and really the grandmother, and how beauty standards can be generational, and that you can have this like generational trauma of beauty expectations, and having a softness for people that have hurt you, to be able to not absolve family members of guilt, but to be able to sympathize with them and empathize with where they were coming from, and ways that they hurt you at times were actually ways that they were trying to protect you. And just like, I loved the emotional story in here. I loved the surface story in here. I would say like the first half of it and the final fourth of it were 5 stars for me, but I ended up giving it 4 stars because like the middle third quarter, I felt like the pacing of it kind of got off track and didn't really add a lot to the story. But otherwise I really enjoyed it, and I liked how unique the characters were, that I had never, that you are following people that you don't necessarily agree with. And so I always love whenever an author can take me on that kind of journey. The final prompt was to read something with a violent term in the title. And so for that, I picked Poking Holes by Juan Valencia. Juan is, you know, one of my friends over at Plagued by Visions on YouTube. And I'd read the first third of these stories a while back, and they are actually disturbing. Hard to read, the kind of thing that makes you, makes me feel icky, that it's so evocative that you are able, he makes you feel the things that you don't want to feel, and really takes you through it. That this is very like transgressive, disturbing, extreme horror, where that's not like a genre that I typically read. And so I had like such a hangover from reading like the first third of these. But I always knew I wanted to finish it. The stories that I'd already read were very well done. It just was something that I wasn't able to read in quick succession. But I'm so glad that I got a chance to finish it now. They're all incredible. This was a 5-star collection for me. And I think, you know, it's not a 5-star collection because he's my friend. It really is. But I do think that it helps that I know him as a person, and that I can trust what he's going to take me through, because a lot of times, like with extreme fiction, extreme horror, the authors, I feel like, what I've read, they're sometimes misguided, and sometimes they're taking you through a dark place, but it's not for a good reason. Whereas like all of these took me to something that ended up repairing something in me, or really there was no other way to tell a story that made you feel like the real human hurts of love and friendship and connection so much that you can't tell those stories sometimes without it being this dark. So it helps that I can, you know, trust that he has the best intentions, that it's not extreme horror for horror's sake, though I think that Juan would probably say like disturbing someone just to disturb someone might be a fine goal to have. That's not really what this was. Just, I mean, incredible stories all the way through. There was one chatty chump that I picked up thinking like, oh, it's kind of like a Black Mirror story. There's this like sloth toy that says weird stuff to this little girl. It's not going to get that bad. It's not as disturbing as the first third, but no, that one was as disturbing too. But I mean, it really made you feel the anguishes of love and desperation. Never before have I read a short story collection and could look at the you know, the table of contents and be like, oh, I remember exactly what that story was about. But this one, I can remember every single story. Just a very effective short story collection that I didn't feel exhausted by like reacquainting myself with the world whenever you start a short story. Sometimes like I hate starting a book and not knowing the characters yet, like really having to do a lot of work in the first few pages to orient yourself. I never felt bogged down whenever I was reading this, that it was really just natural, and the characterization really flows from the narrative and isn't, you know, just loading you with description, you know, right away. But if you're looking to be hurt, then yeah, I would recommend this. If you have been hurt and are looking for some sort of catharsis, then yeah, this is an incredible collection. So yeah, that's everything that I read for Giallo July. Thank you to Alex for putting this together. Giallo is, yeah, it is like one of my favorite genre, and even though I only watched one movie this month, you know, Giallo is for all year long. So maybe if I failed a little bit on the watch-a-thon aspect of this, I will make up for it in the months to come. But yeah, thank you for coming to hang out with me today and listen to me talk about books. Would love to hear if you participate in Giallo July, what your favorite Giallo film is, if you've read any of these books or you feel, you know, which of these sound most interesting to you. Just talk to me down below. I love to chat. But I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!